Hi, my name is Ann Lapour, and I am one of the career advisors in the Office of Career Development in the College of Arts and Sciences at Willamette University. And I am going to talk to you a little bit today about how to choose a graduate program. This is a presentation that I gave a week or so ago to some students on Zoom who could attend, but not everyone could. So I'm here to provide the same information, albeit with not much of an audience, just me. So I realize that anytime we're talking about the future during this strange and scary time of COVID, that it can sometimes feel a little overwhelming. Decisions can become bigger and weightier, and it can be kind of difficult to think about what's coming next. But in career development, we want to make sure that you know what all your options are and you feel comfortable, or as comfortable as possible, making those decisions. And so we want to provide you with as much information as we can. So if you are trying to decide if graduate school might be an appropriate thing for you to do as you finish up at Willamette, then this is the video to watch. So I'm going to actually pull up a presentation, show some websites as well, but mostly talk through what I presented in the presentation last week. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and we will pull up the slides. Okay, here we are. So just a little bit about me, and I'm going to minimize myself here so that I don't block all of my content. Okay, so just so you know a little bit about me, again, my name is Ann Lapour, and I have a doctorate in career psychology, which means I have a degree in helping people figure out what they want to do with their lives and all of the reasons and background pieces that go into making those kinds of decisions. So I did go to graduate school, and I did that process and made those decisions. So I also know what that feels like. So what I'm going to cover today is, first off, how to know if graduate and professional school is even the right thing for you to do when you finish up at Willamette, how to research programs both online as well as reaching out to different professionals or specific programs, checking in on your own priorities and what's important to you in a program and thinking about what some of those factors might be, creating a list of programs that you want to apply to, and then making a final decision. Now, granted, that's a lot of information, and so this is an overview, and I'll mention this probably more than once, but if you're in the process of trying to decide this and feel like you need some additional help or some additional guidance, we are here for you in career development and are definitely still booking career advising appointments over Zoom so that you can still meet with us and talk about your specific, unique, and individual scenario. Okay, so I keep talking about graduate or professional school. What's the difference? So graduate school, these tend to be the programs that are PhD programs and master's degree programs. There are many directions that you can take those, but sometimes they're referred to as academic graduate degrees, and they come in a lot of different names and a lot of different abbreviations, but typically you're going to an academic program and getting a master's or a PhD, and that's what we very broadly call graduate school. Professional school, our programs are those that prepare you to apply a very specific set of skills and knowledge. So the traditional examples that you hear about with professional school are things like medicine, dentistry, law, business, optometry, physical therapy. These are very specific skill sets that you're going to put into practice. So that's what you're going to be doing when you are finished with those programs. Another thing that we'll talk about a little bit further on, a lot of times professional schools, there are still opportunities for financial assistance, but sometimes those are a little bit harder to find and they can be a little bit more expensive as far as those programs go. Okay, so first off, is graduate or professional school right for you? Checking on your goals and whether this is appropriate. I have this little note here that says COVID considerations because I just, again, think it's important to note that you may not be making this kind of decision in a in a typical time. You're not. These are, as we hear a lot, unprecedented times. And so if it just doesn't feel like the right time for you to make such a big decision because of COVID, that's certainly understandable. Or if it feels like, you know what, this is actually a perfect time to go ahead and do graduate school because I'm feeling like I want to get that education, and maybe that's a good thing for me to do right now in such a uncertain economic climate. Maybe that is the answer for you. So that's really personal, and you can only answer that for yourself or with loved ones, but just throwing that out there that may be a big part of your decision-making process. Okay, this is a very possibly intimidating looking outline of what the general, and I mean very general, time frame looks like for graduate school applications. I have listed things like junior year, senior year, and that's oftentimes the way people think about the graduate school timeline, but you certainly don't have to go by that timeline. That's why I have those other timeline indicators there, like 6 months prior or 3 months prior or things like that, because you may want to wait until long after you've graduated to apply to graduate school. So it's not necessarily going to be on the same time frame for everybody. What I'm mostly going to talk about today is the very first couple things on this outline here. Especially the researching programs in depth, beginning developing a list of programs, and that kind of thing. In our next presentation, which we will also post here on our website, we will go over standardized testing as well as crafting personal statements, which is part of the actual application process. And then in our final installment of this workshop series, we will talk about the actual application process. But today I'm mostly going to talk about really researching the programs and trying to figure out if that's where you want to go. So this is here. It's helpful to think about all of the things that have to happen. And I think it's a good reminder that you really can't start this process too early. It's helpful to come and talk to us in career development and get a handle on all of this, but it also doesn't mean that if you're not following this very specific time frame that it's too late. Graduate school will always be there. Okay. So are you ready? Here are some indicators that might tell you that you're ready for graduate or professional school. If you have a well-defined career goal and you know that a graduate degree is a necessary step to achieving that goal. Now, do you need to know exactly what your job title is going to be in 10 years? No, you don't even know what your exact job title is going to be when you finish graduate school. But you need to have a general sense that the direction that you want to go is going to require this additional piece of education or training in some way. So it doesn't have to be laser focused, but it should be more focused than just, oh, I think I might want to dig a little deeper into sociology. Well, why? What is it about sociology that you want to delve deeper into? What types of occupations are you thinking might be interesting to you? Because you really want to know if you are choosing what is an appropriate program for what you want to go into. So another reason to know, or another way to know if you're ready, is if you've already gained experiences, both academic and applied, that will make you a competitive applicant. So what I mean by that is, let's take, for example, psychology. You want to go and get a graduate degree, a master's in counseling, for example. So not only are graduate programs going to want to know that you have some of the basic coursework in psychology, that you understand psychological research, and so some of those academic pieces, but they also want to know that you've had some very hands-on experience working with people. Now, can you do actual therapy as a college student? No, but there are plenty of other experiences that are hands-on and applied that would demonstrate to a graduate program that you're probably a good candidate for being trained as a counselor. So they want to see those things too. And also, if you just feel comfortable jumping right into more school. Some people don't. Some people really want and crave a break from school after they finish their undergrad degree, and that's fine too. So when you might want to wait, basically you're unclear on those career goals. They don't feel honed in enough to know whether this post-grad education is appropriate for you or not. You're unclear what program would even be the best for what your goals are. You're not really sure if it's public policy or if it is political science or if it's law. And you really need to do some more research and gain a little more experience before you know which of those programs might really be the best fit for what you want to do in the future. And you need to gain more experience in order to make yourself competitive. You lack some of those experiences that a graduate program wants to see. So you need a little more time to do that, or you just need a break. So those are some of the reasons that you might want to go or not. And if you decide to wait, that doesn't mean that you're never going to go. A lot of times I hear students say, I'm afraid that if I don't go now, I'll never go. And I don't know that I always think that if it feels more important to wait, then that's probably a good decision. Again, it's very personal and it's very specific to every person. So definitely come talk to us in career development if you're unsure. Okay. So there's a few things that are really important to know about yourself before you make some of these big decisions. So self-knowledge is a really critical piece of the decision-making process for graduate or professional school. Not only for your own peace of mind that you're taking the next step that feels right for you, but also in order to create a really effective or successful graduate school application. So in order to know whether this is the right thing for you to do, you need to know yourself and you need to know your goals. And if you're able to really articulate that in your application materials and really demonstrate, yes, I know what it means to be a physician and I'm ready for that challenge. Or yes, I am fully aware of what running a nonprofit organization might look like. And that's why this master's degree in nonprofit management is a really perfect program for me to tackle. So if you can say that effectively, you will persuade that program in a more effective way. I'm saying effective a lot, but you get the idea. So what are some of the pieces of self-knowledge? Your interests, whether or not you're interested in this particular field, what your specific skill set is. Are you good at working with people? Are you really good at working with data? Are you really good at working in a lab? Depending on what kind of program you're looking at, some of those might be skills that you'd want to talk about. Your personality, that is important. It's important to know and to be able to talk about how you are well suited to this kind of work that you want to do, and what your value system is, and how this aligns with how this particular type of program aligns with that. And you know, there's no perfect one job for any one person, but hopefully if you spent some time assessing what yourself, then you'll make a more well-informed decision. In addition to your self-knowledge, you're also going to need to have some knowledge of specific careers that are out there. So it's important to know what type of postgrad degree you need for whatever you're pursuing. So some methods for researching this are, and it's all of those things listed there, informational interviews. If you've never done an informational interview, I can't really recommend it enough. Oftentimes well, first I'll just say really briefly what that is. It's essentially going and talking to somebody that is in an occupation that you think sounds interesting or cool or something that you might want to pursue, and talking to them about what they do and what they like about it and what they don't like about it. So you think maybe, yeah, I think I might want to be a museum curator. And so you track down a museum curator and you sit down with them over Zoom, probably these days, and have a conversation about their job. And one of the things that you can ask as part of that informational interview is what kind of a graduate degree is necessary for this field. Is it a master's in art history? Is it a master's in nonprofit management? Or is it something else? And so they can give you their insight into that, which is different than just reading it on a website, and oftentimes really, really valuable. Informational interviews with your professors as well, depending on the field, they might have some good insight to that. and what you want to do. LinkedIn can be a really cool way to actually do this in a virtual way. So again, let's take museum curation. You find somebody, hopefully maybe even a Willamette alum on LinkedIn that is doing the kind of work in a museum that you think sounds really cool. Well, can you look at them on LinkedIn, look at their profile, and then go all the way down and look to see what was their degree in? What was their graduate degree in? Look at the dates. Did they go straight to graduate school or did they take some time off? What were some of the jobs they had before they went back to graduate school? What kind of job did they have straight out of graduate school? These are all really good questions to answer. I still think that the in-person networking is irreplaceable, but you can do some of this sleuthing on LinkedIn as well, and it can be really helpful. Doing online research through our career communities, which I will show you in a bit, and doing online research through professional associations. Those can be a huge wealth of resource for students who are interested in a given field. Go to the professional association associated with that field, and you'll find all kinds of information for students who are thinking about pursuing it. And then just online more general job resources or job research sites. So I'm actually going to pull out of my slideshow there for a second and pull up our website. So this is the career development website. And over here on the left-hand side, you'll see this link that says career communities. These are great places to do this career knowledge piece that I'm talking about. So let's say you're interested, you think you might be interested in this sort of cluster of occupations, creative arts, media, communication. And then within that, there's going to be subfields, and you think, well, yeah, writing and publishing sounds like something that I might be interested in. I've always thought the publishing field sounded interesting, so I'm going to look into that. Do I need a graduate degree? What's the next step here? So then you might scroll down, look at some of the industry resources, look at ways to gain experience, internships, and you can also look at specific job boards. That can be useful too, because then you can see, oh, look, there's my dream job. It looks like it requires a master's or something like that. It will also give you this list over here of professional associations. So you can pull up some of those professional associations and do research about that given field. So let's go back over here, museums and artifacts. You can go to the American Alliance on Museums, for example. And that'll take you to a site like this. And then you can look at things like advancing your career or, you know, looking into different news and what's happening in this particular industry so that you can gain a little more insight about whether or not it seems interesting to you, and then also what graduate school looks like. So professional development resources, things like that. So professional associations are a really great place to look, and through our career communities, you can oftentimes find those. Okay, now I'm gonna go back to my presentation here and go to, so what if I'm wrong? It might feel a little anxiety provoking for me to ask all these questions about, is this the right time? Is it not the right time? And you make a decision, then you get there and it doesn't feel like the right one. Career decisions aren't permanent. There are many ways to change directions, to change graduate advisors, or even degrees after you get going. So that may not feel ideal. It doesn't feel ideal for most students when they have to change their major, but it does happen. Just make sure that you've made the best decision you can with the information that you can track down. The more information you get, the more likely you are, and the more experiences you have, the more likely you are to be able to make that decision more confidently. And if you're still feeling lost, come see us for advising. But the bottom line here is that you don't have to have your whole life figured out just to apply for post-grad school. It's just good to have a general idea and a general goal in mind. Okay, and this is just another sort of thing to think about. You can keep researching programs even after you've applied, because you'll potentially interview, connect with professors or potential advisors, and learn more about yourself as the year progresses during that application year. And that will help you as you make that final decision. Okay. So we're going to move on now to how to research programs. So you've decided, yeah, I think this is the time for me to apply to graduate school. Let's get started. So this should be a combination of both online and in-person research or on Zoom. So first off, make a spreadsheet. I cannot stress this enough. It doesn't have to be a spreadsheet. It could be a table. It could be a list. It could be something that you've written with a piece of paper and a pencil, whatever works for you, but you need to have some columns. I do think it's a little easier to do electronically, but you know, you're going to want some columns for each program that you're considering. And then, so you'll have, you know, like a list of schools on one side, and then you'll have all these columns of criteria that are important to you. So what is that criteria? And it should be things that are important to you about the graduate program that you want. So you may want to look at things like faculty that interests you. Oh yeah, I remember meeting that particular professor at a conference, or this particular professor publishes a lot in the area of butterfly migration that I'm really interested in. And so I definitely want to note that in my column that Dr. So-and-so is at such and such university. So I remember that that's where that professor is. Specialized coursework or academic tracks that are particularly important to you. My PhD is in counseling psychology, but not every counseling psychology program has a specialized track and specialized coursework and applied experiences available in the world of career and vocational psychology. So it was really important to me that I picked a graduate program that had faculty that were doing career psychology research, and that I had the opportunity to work in a place like a career center where I could gain some applied experiences in that particular discipline, that particular subset of counseling. And so I really limited my graduate school search to those types of programs. Opportunities for applied experiences, like I said, you know, you really want to work in counseling, but you really want to work with children. Make sure that there's opportunities for maybe you to work at a school or something like that where you can work with kids. So make sure that the experiences that you really want to have are at that particular program, and then note it in your spreadsheet. Geography. This may seem kind of silly, but it's important. You might want to be, it may be really important to you to be close to family or loved ones or a significant other. It might be, maybe you get really depressed when it's cold and snowy, and that's just not something that you feel like you can handle in addition to the stress of just being a graduate student. That's important. And it's not everything, but it is something to consider. Also things like, you know, students will oftentimes factor in things like the diversity of the location that they're going to be in. Some students really want a large city, some don't. You need to feel somewhat at home. So definitely consider those things. The benefits or detractors of the campus or the location. That's similar, but what does that campus have to offer? Financial aid opportunities. This is a huge one. A lot of schools do have pretty massive financial aid options, particularly PhD programs and sometimes master's programs. Will have opportunities to apply for things called assistantships, which essentially provide you a job on campus, like being a teaching assistant or a research assistant, and then tuition and sometimes other aspects of your expenses as a graduate student will be covered or waived. You can also sometimes earn a stipend, meaning a little salary. It's not luxurious, but it's something that helps pay your living expenses. Some programs have really robust programs for that. Some don't. That's something that you want to find out about before you make that decision. How competitive is the school? What's the rate of acceptance? Those might be things that you want to add. And the deadline. It's just helpful to have the deadline on there. When it's things like medical school where there's a common application and everybody's got the same deadline, that's handy. But for PhD programs and master's programs, they may all have different deadlines, which is definitely a lot to keep track of. So you want to stay organized with that from the beginning. Okay, and then you're ready to start researching. So now that you've got your structure and your template in place to plug in all of this information, get in there. Start with a manageable list of schools that you can narrow down over time. So there's a lot of ways to sort of search for that initial list of schools. Those professional association websites that I was talking about before, sometimes those have really cool ways to search, like they have like search features for graduate programs, or sometimes they just have lists of programs in that particular discipline. Check the publications, like I said before, in your area of interest. Who authored those articles, and then where do they teach? Where do they research? Where do they work? LinkedIn, again, I talked about that before, school alma maters. So you see somebody who's a Willamette alum, maybe you've even heard of them. They have a really illustrious or interesting or background, or one that just really aligns with what you're interested in. Find out where they went to school, what program they went to. And a lot of times your professors have great insight into what the strong academic programs for your area of interest might be. So those are a few ways to start. You may rule some out very quickly, in which case maybe they don't make it to your spreadsheet. So really try to limit things to your spreadsheet that you are strongly considering. Okay, so being a prospective student, this is important. I find that a lot of times when I'm working with students, they find asking questions or being that prospective student for graduate programs a little intimidating, maybe more so than when you were getting ready to look at undergraduate institutions. And it may look a little different, and especially during COVID, things are going to look a little bit different. But on the one hand, I mean, there's not much great you can say about COVID, but at the same time, schools are going to be prepared and ready to help you gain as much knowledge about that school as you can without having to travel there, which is pretty cool. Like, you don't have to pay for that airplane flight to go interview, because it's probably going to happen over Zoom. And maybe that campus visit, maybe that's something that you can do virtually in some way. So there might be some cool opportunities to do that. So don't ignore this piece of the process. You really want to make sure that you're getting all your questions answered. You can reach out and speak to both current students of a program. There's often, almost all the time, there will be some student ambassadors listed for a given academic program, graduate students that have been identified or have volunteered to provide information for other prospective students and can talk to you about that program. And then there's also usually professors or staff members of that program that can talk to you as well. So just a couple things to keep in mind. You absolutely should do this. You should absolutely talk to the professors and the students, but do some research in advance. Don't just make an appointment with a professor at such and such institution and say, so what do you research? You should know that going into it. You should know what their research agenda is, what are some of the strengths of that school, and then be much more specific in the kinds of questions that you're asking. It's not like showing up for a campus tour and just listening to them talk to you. You need to be ready and prepared with some questions for them. Respect the professor's time. If you want to reach out over email to a potential advisor for a PhD program, you want it to be relatively brief and have some very specific questions. Also give them the opportunity to tell you whether a phone conversation or a Zoom conversation might be more convenient than answering a long email. Respect their process. If they very specifically say on their website, any questions or prospective students should reach out to this particular person, then do that. Don't just sidestep the process, and treat every interaction like an interview. So even if you're just talking to a current student and you want to get a read on what it's like to be a student in that program, it's fine to be maybe a little more casual than you'd be with a professor, but you still want to be professional and appropriate, and because anything that you say in that process can be passed on. You should really consider it as part of the interview process. Okay, so how many schools is enough? How do you know if you have enough schools on your list? Well, it depends. So you need to consider a few things. How competitive is this program? PhD programs, for example, are usually quite a bit more competitive because they take so few students. A PhD program in chemistry might take only 5 students in a given year. So you need to definitely think about that piece of it. versus, for example, a master's program that takes 40 students. So obviously that's a little less competitive. And so you want to think about sort of where you fall in that. How much money does it cost to apply? In the standardized test presentation, we'll talk a little bit about things like fee reduction for GREs and stuff like that. You can usually find some assistance for those kinds of things, but it still gets expensive. There's application fees and testing fees, and it just gets expensive. And so there may be a point at which you have to cut that off. How flexible are you? Do you really have to be on the West Coast and that's it? Or maybe you really want to be near family and you have to be in the state of Washington. So that's obviously going to cut down on the number of programs. So some of these are just more personal value questions. PhD or master's, I already talked about that. It's important to remember too that the prestige level of the university as a whole might not be the same for your particular area of study. So just because Yale or Harvard or something like that is a really illustrious sounding school for X program, it doesn't mean that it's going to be the best program for you and for what you want to study. So sometimes it may seem like the strongest programs are in kind of random locations, and that's fine. You should definitely consider those. So don't always just go by how fancy the name sounds, because for graduate school, it's a whole different thing. What you should think about is what is the best fit. So you should have, just like maybe you did going into undergrad, you should have sort of tiers of schools that you are going to apply to. So you should have your top tier, your reach, or your dream schools. And these are going to be not based on how fancy it sounds, but on what is the best fit and the schools that fit the greatest number of your criteria. You'll have some mid-tier choices that fit some of your criteria, and you'd be like, yeah, I could go there. Maybe it's not everything, but you still feel good about those choices. And then some safety schools. That might be a number of things. That might be a non-PhD program, and all the rest of the things you're applying for are PhD programs, or just simply a less competitive school. But have a variety, just like you did potentially when you were applying to undergrad school. Okay, we're skipping a very big piece of the process, which is actually applying to schools, but we're going to get to that in our last installment of this little series. So come back for the next sessions on testing, personal statements, application process. That's October 7th and October 14th. And of course, we will post those presentations as well. So yay, you've been accepted to graduate school or professional school. There's still more decisions to make, more factors to consider. How has COVID potentially impacted the program? Do they still have some of the things going on at that particular program that most drew you to it? Or have some of those things gone by the wayside because of COVID? You've been accepted somewhere and you really want to know if it's the right school and you'd really like to visit. And can you visit? If you can't because of COVID, then can you visit virtually? And what are some of your impressions? Asked to speak with a potential academic advisor, asked to speak with current students of the program and do further research on financial aid, the geography, anything else that's going to affect your quality of life. So even after you've been accepted to some schools, you still have some questions to ask yourself and some information to gather. Okay, and so then decision making in general, again. So I like that little cartoon because I think it speaks to the universal, I think, experience of having to make big decisions. Most people don't like it. Some people are pretty good at it. Some people feel really lost, and it's just helpful to know how you approach decisions. So know your decision-making style. Use that decision-making style, but then maybe mix it up. I'm somebody that makes decisions a lot based on my gut and what feels right. So when I'm making a real big decision, it's helpful for me to use that, but to also force myself to do some of that more analytical thinking, make that pro-con list or whatever it is I need to do. So try to use a variety of styles. Talk to multiple people if that helps. If you start to be getting too much input, maybe back off on that, but but talk to different types of people. Don't just talk to your professors or just talk to your friends. Come talk to us in career development as well. Revisit what your values are. A lot of times revisiting those values and what's most important to you will help in that decision. And then again, as I've said several times, you can make an advising appointment. Oh, sorry. Okay. So that about covers it. I wanted to, again, say that we have another presentation coming up on personal statements and standardized testing. By the time this video goes live on our site, the personal statement and standardized testing presentation may or may not have already happened, but please rest assured we will be posting that as well. There's also some information about the Willamette Data Science Masters, the MBA programs and the JD programs coming up on October 7th. And then on October 14th, I will be back to do a pretty deep dive into the actual application process. So that will be at 4 o'clock on Zoom on October 14th. So definitely watch out for the links to those Zoom meetings through Career Talk and also on the events page on our website. And this is the part where if you were here live with me, I would answer all of your questions. So I hope that this has been helpful in giving you a little bit of a sense of what some of the important things are to think about when you're trying to decide if you want to go to a graduate or professional program or apply to one. Again, visit us in career development, and we're happy to help you on a very individualized basis. So best wishes to you all in this crazy, crazy time. And I hope that whatever you decide about your future and graduate school, that you feel good about it and that you find some of these resources helpful. Thanks. Bye.